mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his mouth. Attachment is the perfection of all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendent knowledge. He is my Lord, Lord of the world. From the midst that remain my enemies, my ignorance is destroyed. The living scriptures of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me, give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. Make shelter of your lotus feet. Jai Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajikacharya Stoktra Satasri Srimati Divine Grace Abhay Charanavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Vishnupad Krishna Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Anta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Ramacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Sadhu Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kundan Ki Govardhan Ki Mathura Vrindavan Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Purushottam Chaitanya Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Gangamai Yamnamai Bhakti Devi Ki Radharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Sri Harinam Sankirtan Yajna Ki Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Sri Sri Krishna Balaram Ki Sri Sai Gauranga Ki Srinivasa Govinda Ki Sri Prahlad Nrsimhadev Ki Sri Hanuman Jayanti Mahotsav Ki Jai Ho Premanande Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Prabhupada Ki Jai
Yeah, just ask quick.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Krishna. We read from Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, chapter 6, text number 48. Evam griheshu abhirato.
Evam griheshu abhirato.
Evam griheshu abhirato.
Evam griheshu abhirato.
Vishayan vividaihi sukaihi. Vishayan vividaihi sukaihi.
Vishayan vividaihi sukaihi.
Sevamano na chatushyad.
Sevamano na chatushyad.
Sevamano na chatushyad.
Sevamano na chatushyad.
Ajyastokair ivanalaha.
Ajyastokair ivanalaha.
Ajyastokair ivanalaha.
Ajyastokair ivanalaha. Evam gruheshu abhirato. Evam gruheshu abhirato. Vishayan vividhai sukhai.
Vishayan vividhai sukhai.
Sevamano na chatu. Ajyastokair ivanalaha.
Evam griheshu abhirato Vishayan vividai sukaihi. Word to word translate this way. Griheshu, in household affairs. Abhirataha, being always engaged. Vishayan, material paraphernalia. Vividaihi, with varieties of. Sukaihi, happiness. Sevamanaha, enjoying. Na, not. Cha, also. Atushyat, satisfied him. Ajastokaihi, by drops of fat. Iva, like Analaha, a fire. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. In this way, Saubhari Muni enjoyed sense gratification in the material world, but he was not at all satisfied. Just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat. Purport. Material desire is just like a blazing fire. If a fire is constantly supplied with drops of fat, the fire will increase more and more and never be extinguished. Therefore, the policy of trying to satisfy material desires by catering to one's material demands will never be successful. In modern civilization, everyone is engaged in economic development, which is another way of constantly dropping fat into the material fire. The Western countries have reached the summit of material civilization, but people are still dissatisfied. Real satisfaction is Krishna consciousness. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 5.29, where Krishna says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam, sarva loka maheshwaram, suhridam sarva bhutanam, gnatva mam shanti mrichyati. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. One must therefore take to Krishna consciousness and advance in Krishna consciousness by properly following the regulative principles. Then one can attain an eternal blissful life in peace and knowledge. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Itinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. In this way, Saubhari Muni enjoyed sense gratification in the material world, but he was not at all satisfied. Just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat. This is a very interesting description of the life of Saubhari Muni, which has a lot of life lessons for all of us to follow. I'll give a little bit of background about this story. Many of you might know it, but just to give you a little background of what happened, how did Saubhari Muni end up in this situation? And then we'll talk a little bit about what Srila Prabhupada is describing here, that material desire is just like a blazing fire. You keep putting fat into it, clarified butter, fat, or any oil into it. It's not going to extinguish. It's going to constantly continue burning. Right? That is the nature of material desires. So, the story goes that, I shouldn't say story, the history goes that Saubhari Muni was a great Muni who was who wanted to practice austerities. So, in this world, there are different processes of linking to the Supreme Lord. Right? We call that yoga. Yoga means to link. Yunjidatu, link. So one of the processes of linking to the Lord is the process of Ashtanga Yoga. So in this, Saubhari Muni wanted to practice Ashtanga Yoga. And in the Ashtanga Yoga process, it is described that, one should go to the forest. And one should go find a place that is not too high, not too low, right? And then you should go find a place to sit. You should spread some kusha grass, and then put a deer skin on top of it, and then sit down there and meditate. And there's a description of how the meditation process should be done. But if you understand, why is there the first thing is, okay, you have to go to the forest to meditate. Can somebody tell me why they should go to the forest to meditate? No? No material distractions. It's a good point. And what else? Sattvic in nature. Right? So it is described in the Shastras that different places have a natural propensity, natural qualities of the three gunas associated with them. Right? You go to New York City, right? You stand in the middle of Times Square. Right? It's all people going past you this way, that way. It's a confluence of many streets. There's a constant ebb of people going. I don't know where they're going, what they're doing. Everybody's going back and forth, right? There are people dressed up in suits and they're walking up and down. Then there are others who are there for their once in a lifetime vacation, right? Who are trying to engage the senses in a place like that. Naturally, those rajasic in this to reduce the distractions. So Saubhari Muni thought a little bit further ahead and said, well, if I'm in the forest, I might see some people going around, and there might be, some animals coming. There might be more distractions in the forest. Let me play it safer, and I'll go into the water and meditate inside the water in the river Yamuna. So he went. Usually people go to the bank of the Yamuna and find a good place and meditate. He went into the water of the Yamuna you know. And when a person practices Ashtanga Yoga, you know, pranayama and all of this, and is one of the parts of it. It is said that as you practice for become perfect in your practice, you're able to hold your breath for a significant amount of time. So that's how Sobari Muni went into the Ashtanga Yoga. Now, Bhagavatam describes that while he was practicing in the Yamuna, he happened to see the loving affairs of two fish, and he got agitated by it. You know? It is very surprising, you know, somebody goes all the way down to the into the water with the intention of practicing austerities. How can he be attracted by, to fish? It's not something that naturally, just because the fish are engaged in, loving affairs, it shouldn't agitate somebody, right? Naturally, usually, we would think it wouldn't, but that's the nature of this material world, right? Small things can trigger. Again, it all depends, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about dhyayato vishayan pumsaha. Once your thoughts dwell just for a slight bit, then you're releasing an avalanche of different activities. Because you see, after all, this mind-body system is a machine. There are certain things that are pre-programmed in this machine, and you have to be careful about what the programming is and how do you deal with it. So once you trigger, for example, the hormonal system and different things in this body, once an action is triggered, everything else after that is a cascading effect of just chemical reactions that are not in your control. They're part of an involuntary system. But what is in your control is the first part of it, like where you put your consciousness. But there is actually a little bit of backstory to this. Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, when he gives the commentary on this incident, he gives the backstory of why Sobari Muni was actually attracted by fish. Right? I mean, for many of us, even if you see a fish having, loving affairs, none of us are going to be attracted. Most likely, I'm hoping, it's not going to trigger any thoughts. But the point is, why did such an advanced person as Sobari Muni, why did he get impacted by this? The backstory is that when Sobari Muni was down there practicing austerities, it seems once Garuda was actually fishing in those waters. Garuda is obviously an eagle, right? Though transcendental, he has to live by the rules of his body, and he lives by eating fish and snakes and things like that. And so Garuda was actually fishing in those waters, and one fish was afraid of Garuda, and Garuda was trying to catch him, and he comes and seeks shelter of Sobari Muni. And think about it. Sobari Muni is an ascetic over there, and the fish came and sought shelter of him, and he gave it shelter, right, from Garuda. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that was an offense to Garuda, right? So Garuda is a great devotee of the Lord. It is that the fact is that he is in the body of an eagle, And so his natural food was fish. And so Saubhari Muni, by not allowing Garuda to have the fish, offended him. You know? And that is the reason why that he actually got agitated by just looking at fish. You know? So it's an interesting lesson of how Vaishnava Aparad, even though not that Saubhari Muni is very intentionally envious of Garuda, and then he's saying, I want to teach Garuda a lesson. Who do you think is the boss? And I'm the boss. When I say I'm going to give protection to somebody, I can protect somebody. He's not going through all those thoughts of envy and comparison and, explicit ill thinking of another devotee. These are all not things that are at least explained over here. That was what was in the back, mind of Saubhari Muni. But still, the fact that he offended Garuda by that action resulted in him losing his link to the Lord for a significant amount of time. See, when you do Vaishnava Aparad, it's not that you're permanently, all your spiritual credit is totally destroyed. For the moment, definitely yes. And if you think of the story of Saubhari Muni, he had to sit and contemplate on this and these actions and repent, and then that's when he got relieved of that Vaishnava Aparad. We'll talk about what actually happened. So it's a pretty serious thing, this Vaishnava Aparad. Let's parking lot that for a second. We'll come back and talk a little bit more in detail about that. Let's continue the story of Saubhari Muni, understand what happened. And so at that point, he became so agitated that he decided that, I need to marry and live the life of a grihastha. So, he was a very powerful sage. So what he did was he got out of the river Yamuna and went to the king of King Mandata. So he was the emperor of the world. And when he went over there, so when he went to Mandata's palace, he was an old saint, a sage. Actually, his skin was all, very weak and flabby. So what happened was, when King Mandata was, he went and approached the king and said, "Can you please give me one of your daughters in charity so that I can marry them?" So King Mandata, what he said was, "Well, any of my daughters can marry as they wish. So you can go and ask them." So, that was the system for the Kshatriyas especially, Swayamvara process, or a process of leaving it to the decision of the princess was one of the known processes of arranging marriages. So he went and asked, so then what Saubhari Muni did was, he decided, this body is so weak and fragile, nobody is going to be attracted by this body, so let me use my mystic power and rejuvenate myself. You see, how things start, right? It started as one, he got attracted. Now, he's going and using his mystic power to transform himself into a youth. It is said that he became such a youthful and attractive person, let alone the princesses of this world. It is said that, he could attract anybody from the higher planetary system as well. Any, women from even the highest planetary systems would be completely drawn to his beauty, his material body, his beauty. And so when he went and presented himself, one of the king's messengers came and took him to the queens, to the princesses, and then he presented himself and said, is anybody here who'd like to marry me? The king had 50 princesses. All 50 of them wanted to marry him. In fact, Prabhupada describes that the sisters gave up their sisterly affection and started fighting with each other. I'm the first one who saw him. I need to marry him. I'm the eldest. I need to marry. I'm the youngest. I need to marry. They started fighting amongst themselves. And so Saubhari Muni said, don't fight. Let me settle this. I'll marry all 50 of you. And so now, the story goes on that, now he had to change his body. Now he has married 50. He only wanted to marry one. But now he's stuck with marrying 50. He went and asked, is any of you ready to marry me? And all of them said yes. He's obligated, sort of. And now he had to expand his paraphernalia. He was an ascetic, living, not even in a hut, almost he was living in the water, in the Yamuna. So not a suitable place for Grihastha ashrama. So he created a whole paraphernalia. I'll just read actually, there's a description of because Saubhari Muni was expert in chanting mantras perfectly, his severe austerities resulted in an opulent home with garments, ornaments, properly dressed and decorated maidservants and manservants, and varieties of parks with clear water lakes and gardens. In the gardens, fragrant with varieties of flowers, birds chirped and bees hummed, surrounded by professional singers. Saubhari Muni's home was amply provided with valuable beds, seats, ornaments, and arrangements for bathing. There were varieties of sandalwood creams, flower garlands, and palatable dishes. Thus, surrounded by opulent paraphernalia, the Muni engaged family affairs with his numerous wives. Interestingly, Mandhata, the king of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, was struck with wonder when he saw the household opulence of Saubhari Muni. Thus, he gave up his false prestige in his position as emperor of the world. You see, everything actually has good impacts, King Mandhata was like all the 7 islands. It's Bharata Varsha. There are 7 Varshas that are described in a Vedic understanding of the world. He was the ruler of the entire world. And obviously that comes with a sense of prestige and feeling that he's the king. In this situation, the opulence of Saubhari Muni was so outrageous, so to speak, that Mandhata was humbled by it. And that became an impetus for him to give up his false prestige as emperor of the world. We can imagine, what opulence Saubhari Muni must have exhibited. See, that is another thing here, right? It is not that, devotees or, devotees of the Lord do not have access to the Ashtasiddhis or, the different opulences of this world. It is just that by purpose, the devotees of the Lord desire not to engage in them. This is a lesson for us as well. When we are blessed with different kinds of opulences in this world, may it be, Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shri, right? Those are the 4 opulences that come for a person. The Janma birth in a very prestigious family, Aishwarya, wealth, Shruta, education, and Shri, opulence, wealth. Right? So these shouldn't become distractions for us. And we should be very cautious of using only what is absolutely necessary. Right? Why? Because just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat, our material desires will not cease. It is not that, by engaging or indulging in this material world, I'll just do this, right? Usually, brahmacharis, when they're initially practicing, austerities and becoming, building the foundation, many of them reach a point in life where they said, you know what, I'm getting too distracted by this material world, by the opposite sex. So let me, just settle down, practice Grihastha very nicely and sincerely, and all my, distractions will reduce, right? My desires will, they'll get satisfied, so they'll get subdued. I can peacefully practice, peacefully, in quotation marks, practice Krishna consciousness. The Shastras explain that there's a inbuilt fallacy in that assumption, right? Because the satisfaction of the material desires is not going to result in abasion of those material desires. They're going to continue. It's actually going to become worse. That is why in the Shastras, it is clearly explained, it is no different from an itch. Right? When you have an itch, all of us have experienced this. We have first-hand experience, but we don't learn a lesson from that. So when there's an itch, you scratch it. Right? What happens? Immediately, there's relief. How long does that relief last? Few seconds. Few seconds. The itch will come back in renewed, vigorous, vigorous level. It is now what used to be like a small distraction. Now it's a bigger distraction. Now you scratch more relief comes. And then the itch comes back with more force. Scratch and scratch and scratch, it starts bleeding. And still, this thing, Nowadays, with the pollens outside, the eyes itching is a better example. I actually have these allergies. I start itching, and around the eyes, it's like needles. It feels like, it's like a burning sensation. And you start rubbing like this. That's you touch your hand to the eyes, you're dead. The end result is excruciating pain around the eyes. Anybody who's experienced this can vouch for that. There is nothing good comes out of touching your eyes. If you somehow tolerate and just put some water, clean up, those are the kind of things that might give you some relief. But not this. This is not going to help you. Very similarly here, it did not help Sobhari Muni either. See, but being an elevated person, right? Thereafter, one day, while Sobhari Muni, who was expert in chanting mantras, was sitting in a secluded place. See, he still needed a secluded place to collect his thoughts, right? He thought to himself about the cause of his fall down, which was simply that he had associated himself with the sexual affairs of the fish. Right? He got a chance to contemplate about his fall down and reflect on it. And he said, alas, while practicing austerity, even within the depths of the water, and while observing all the rules and regulations practiced by saintly persons, I lost the result of my long austerities simply by association with the sexual affairs of a fish. Everyone should observe this fall down and learn from it. Right? See, as I said, Vishnu Chakra Thakur gives, to backstory of the Vaishnava Parad as well. There are two lessons to be learned about how we should be very careful about offending other Vaishnavas. See, we take this for granted. Sometimes we think, oh, this person is my peer. This person is a junior devotee, a senior, whatever, right? Junior, senior. And I have cause to be offensive. They acted in such a bad way. They did this, she did this, he did that. And that's why I have a right. I'm being fair. I'm not being, unfair in this. Ask anybody, this is the first thing. Ask anybody. What would you do, if you're in this situation? See, the smartest thing to do in these situations is transfer that burden of deciding to somebody else. Easy problem. Solve. Transfer the problem to somebody else. Right? In a Vaishnava community, we have a system of authority structure and systems like that. When you are faced with a problem, and when you are faced with situations when somebody, by any application of law or your own understanding of fairness or your own understanding of what is good and right, somebody is egregiously, it doesn't have to be in subtly, egregiously violated the rules and offended you, right? The first simplest thing to do is ignore, right? If you ignore, then there's nothing, you're not even impacted by it. You just move on and say, fine, he was in a bad mood, he did like this, I am not going to take any offense. Let me forgive him. That is a first class Vaishnava. Because you are recognizing not only that mistake was theirs, but you're also recognizing that they are offending you, who might be the smallest of a Vaishnava, but somehow you're chanting, you're still a Vaishnava. Right? You're not thinking, I'm a big Vaishnava, he's offending me, that's why I'll forgive him. That's also not the right attitude. The attitude is, I am the lowest of the Vaishnavas, but still, the person is offending me. Let me explicitly forgive them. Because that is the nature of these rules of Vaishnava Parad. A person who is being offended has to forgive. So you say, he must be in a bad mood today. After all, he's a nice devotee. He or she is a nice devotee. Something must have happened. Let me not take offense at it, and you forgive. That is a first-class Vaishnava. When you do that, you are being purified as well. You are passing a test. Because when these situations are created, it is not a one-sided. It's not only a test for that person, it's a test for you as well. You should remember that. Why are you put in that situation? A, your karma dictated that you had to go through that experience. B, Maya and Krishna are using that to test you, to see, are you going to be in equanimity, or are you going to react to that? Right? Are you going to react, or are you going to act in a proper consciousness? So that is the second order devotee, the second class devotee, may not be that elevated to forgive. Right? Many of us are not. And we may get agitated by that situation. It happens. Right? At that point, a second class devotee will do, what will he do? He will put the monkey on somebody else's back. Right? And there is an authority structure, there is a counselor, there is some TC members and temple president, all these authority structures. Right? Go to whoever you have, you go to your counselor first, or if you're not feeling that confident, go to a TC member. Go there and tell them, I got agitated by this, you please solve this, and you say that and disappear from there. Right? I want to find out what you did. What was the action you taken? That person has not changed. They continue to do this. Why are you bothered about what is that person doing, what the person is not doing? Right? Is that you are, at least put the monkey on the authority's back and forget it and you disappear from there. That is a second-class devotee. Right? He's at least transferring the problem to somebody else. And hopefully that person is not going to take the problem on his head and create a big headache for himself. If the person is qualified enough, he will deal with it in a way that it will just dissipate the matter. Right? And that person, the person who offended, if he is sensible, and somebody comes and tells him, hey, you created this offense, go and beg their forgiveness. That much sensibility is there, they'll go and beg their forgiveness and settle the matter. Unfortunately, there are many third-class devotees as well, where, as I said, after telling also they don't give up. Why is he still doing it? Why is she still doing it? Again it happened, this happened. And the person who offended, even after being told, this you're not doing the right thing, go for beg forgiveness, finish the matter. Why you want to take this headache with you? They're not ready to listen. They have to face the consequences of Saubhari Muni. Right? They have to get stuck in this world for, imagine, he was nicely, happily practicing yoga. He had to give up all that. Not only had to give up all that, he had to burn some of his austerities to create all this, new body, new this thing, go create house. Nothing comes free in this world. It's a price you have to pay for everything. Every time you go create, this opulent, this thing, that opulent thing, this new car, new house, there's a depletion of the resultant of your good activities that is happening. Right? A devotee should be conscious of these things. Minimize your external necessities because it is a depletion of your opulence. Your opulence of austerity and the punya that you create. And you have to go through all this, and then after enjoying for thousands of years, you have to remember that, what am I doing? How did I get stuck here? What did I do? And he has to remember that. And I'm sure the backstory would be he has to beg forgiveness of Garuda, at least in the mind, in order to get relieved from the offense. And then come back to his actual state. In the beginning, I was alone and engaged in performing the austerities of mystic yoga. But later, because of the association of fish engaged in sex, I desired to marry. Then I became the husband of 50 wives, and each of them I begot 100 sons, and thus my family increased to 5,000 members. By the influence of the modes of material nature, I became fallen and thought that I would be happy in material life. Thus there is no end to my desires for enjoyment in this life and the next. In this way, he passed his life in household affairs for some time, but then he became detached from material enjoyment. He renounced the material association, he accepted the Vanaprastha order and went to the forest. His devoted wives followed him, for they had no shelter other than their husband. The next sloka is very important, and I'll stop there. When Saubhari Muni, who was quite conversant with the self, went to the forest, he performed severe penances. In this way, in the fire at the time of death, he ultimately engaged himself in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is described that in the Ashtanga Yoga process, you actually have to pick your own time of death. Right? They know the astrological calculations and they pick the appropriate time when they'll be elevated to the, depending on where they want to go. Right? Some just want to go to higher planetary systems or to Brahmaloka. They will go there because they have to know when to calculate the time to go. At that time, in the fire, they generate internal fire and they immolate their body in that fire. That's the tough process of Ashtanga Yoga. In the purport, Prabhupada explains, at the time of death, fire burns the gross body. And if there is no more desire for material enjoyment, the subtle body is also ended. And in this way, a pure soul remains. That pure soul then go back to Godhead. See, this is a very powerful thing we should remember. If we have an iota of material desire, that subtle body is not going to disappear. As Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, that subtle body now will take the soul and go to the next body. There is only one means of escape from this body. Our material desires have to become zero. We have to spiritualize all our desires, right? And there's a whole process of doing that. But that's a very important lesson for us to learn from this. We have to be careful about offending other Vaishnavas. We have to be careful about, we have to introspect, sometimes in our spiritual lives, if we are getting a sudden lack of enthusiasm to practice, sudden dip in your steadfastness in practicing Krishna consciousness. If you start thinking, oh, this temple is bad, that temple is bad, these devotees are bad, that problem, this thing. This material world, as long as you are here, there will be problems. You go from, this temple to that temple, the problem will be a little different. The problem might come in the form of other devotees, different devotees, different this thing. The problems will exist. Even among the association of Vaishnavas, there will be problems. And if you're trying to find problems, you'll find problems everywhere. So we have to be very careful, when we get into this mode, we should reflect on thinking, okay, whom am I offending that I'm getting this resultant reaction of losing the attraction for Krishna consciousness? That is an important introspection we need to do. We'll stop here. Anybody has any questions, any comments? No questions? Okay. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Shri Prabhupada ki, Bol Pati Manande.